It's not about becoming more disciplined. It's about regulating. So giving yourself space between one task to the next, getting enough sunlight, spending enough time in nature, getting enough sleep. If you're not eating well and eating good, whole, nutritious foods that actually support your gut and don't cause inflammation in the gut, if you're not taking time for yourself, if you're not doing deep breath work, these are all things that contribute to chronic stress and your health being depleted, because these are things that God designed us to do every single day. He didn't design us to live in overwhelm and to overexert ourselves every single day. He designed us to live and operate from a place of peace and joy every single day. Hello, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Cassie Hutton of the podcast, Christian Wellness for Weary Women, Heal Burnout Through Trauma-Informed Wellness Coaching. Welcome to my humble abode. This is my recording studio. You are looking at my bedroom. My computer's on my bed. We're in a tiny cabin. We're about a month away from moving into our new home. I'm so excited. I'll have a brand new, very beautiful background for you guys to look at, and it'll just be a lot more pleasant to record from, because as you know, I'm on my yoga ball and I don't have an actual chair to sit on or a desk to put my legs under. And so I am up against my bed and I record the best way that I can. So on last week's podcast episode, I had some show notes and I was looking down at those show notes. Today, I didn't print my show notes off. They're on my computer. And so I may be looking down at them to make sure that I don't miss something today. We're going to talk about 3 ways burnout triggers perimenopause symptoms in women under chronic stress. And so I'm going to give you my viewpoint on perimenopause and what I actually believe perimenopause is, that it's actually not a thing at all. It is actually burnout, women going through burnout, because it's just this phrase that we've coined to try to tell women that, oh, what you're experiencing is normal. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we get into all of that, I want you to join me. First of all, Happy New Year. It's a brand new year, 2026, January, and it's probably really, really cold outside where you're at. The month of January and February are always like so uncomfortably cold to me that I'm like a hibernating bear. I don't go outside unless I absolutely have to. I am bundled up layers upon layers upon layers, and the heat is turned up in my house extremely high, because in this tiny cabin, especially because it's very drafty, it needs new windows, it needs a few things sealed up, okay? But that's where we're at right now. And hopefully by the time that this podcast episode comes out, we might not be moved in to our new cabin at that time, but that's okay. We're only our new house. I don't know why I said cabin, but we're only weeks away. And so I'm so excited about that. And so as we jump into the new year, I just want to invite you to join me in working with me to reset your body, to reset your hormones, to reset the things that you feel like you feel like you've been drained. You feel like you've been walking. Sorry, I want to make sure that was okay. To reset your hormones, to gain your energy back. That's what I do. I work with women who are going through burnout and fatigue. And so when I say burnout, I'm not talking about, oh, I'm burned out on this thing. I'm literally talking your body is so depleted from pushing yourself too hard for too long in life in general. Like you hear about people going through burnout in like ministry, right? They're like burned out in it. They've pushed themselves too hard, too long. They'll say, I got burned out in that thing. They did too much, too quick, for too long. And so their body or their mind, like they're over it. And they're like, when I think about that thing again, I don't want to do it because it was like too overwhelming. But this is like when you're going through burnout in life in general is overwhelming because your body is depleted of all resources that it needs to regulate your body. And so that's what we do inside my Rooted and Restored Wellness program. We do an HTMA test, hair tissue mineral analysis, where we look at all your mineral levels within your body. We look at single mineral level rate, and then we also look at ratios in comparison to one another, because those ratios, so for example, we look at sodium to potassium. So how well are you hydrated? How much inflammation are you dealing with? And that also tells us how much chronic stress or acute stress that you've been dealing with in your life over short or long periods of time, and how you're handling that stress as well. We can see whether you're stuck in parasympathetic dominance or sympathetic dominance. Are you stuck in that like you're in this freeze mode, or are you still in fight or flight mode? We can see where your blood sugar levels are off, because blood sugar is not just about balancing carbs and protein and fiber, it's also about calcium and magnesium. Calcium and magnesium make sure that you are releasing insulin and that it's getting absorbed into the bloodstream. We are looking at how well your cells are communicating with one another. And so we're looking at all of these things. And what I love to tell clients is it's not like blood work. Sometimes blood work comes back and it's like, well, everything's fine. We don't really have anything to work on. But with an HTMA test, something is always going to come back that we can work on. And it's going to give us answers, the real upstream answers to what's happening downstream. You're experiencing these symptoms, but we are able to look back at what's going on in the tissues of the body to help you, because the body pulls from the tissues to make sure the blood has everything that it needs. And so a lot of times this is why blood tests show up normal and you're still experiencing tons of symptoms. And that's exactly, well, it's what happened to me. I'll kind of get into more of my story. I never had blood work done. I did have a thyroid test done, but it was like on my terms. I did the test, I went and had it done, and then the practitioner that I worked with helped me thumb through that and get some answers for myself. So if you are interested in working with me, I also offer a free call to answer any of your questions, but you can go to join.cassiehutton.com to read more about my Rooted and Restored Wellness program, where you also get my bonus Made Whole Inner Healing course. It's a 6-module course that we work through all of those things at the same time, through all of the emotions and the inner healing struggles that have surfaced. And that's what a lot of what we're going to talk about today, talking about perimenopause and menopause even in general, why women experience such extreme emotions and such extreme symptoms when they start entering into menopause, or women at ages 35 and 40 entering into these menopause type symptoms and not knowing what's going on with their body. And so a little bit of my story as we move into the episode. I hit burnout like right after I had my 4th baby. And so I thought my body was confused, like I'm going through postpartum, I'm breastfeeding, so I shouldn't be having a period. Why am I all of a sudden bleeding again? It has only been 2 weeks since I stopped my bleed, so my healing bleed from having a baby, which took way longer than normal, by the way. Sign number 1 that something was not right and my body didn't have the resources to heal after the pregnancy, okay? So if you're bleeding for longer than you should have after you had a baby, hello, like your body doesn't have the resources to heal. So if you're taking longer to heal in general, all things, just little cuts, scrapes, bruises, if you're not healing properly, your body's depleted in something that it needs in order to heal. And so that was the number 1 sign. And then 2 weeks later, I was like having a period and I was like, what is this? Like, this isn't normal for me. What's going on? And then 2 weeks later, and then 2 weeks later. And I was just Googling lots of things. I was going to Google, like asking, why am I having irregular periods after having a baby? And could this be it? I reached out to my midwife. I was like, is it? And so the phrases that I was getting back from the symptoms that I was putting in was perimenopause. Or whenever I downloaded a cycle tracking app, and I think it was Flow that I downloaded, and I would track my symptoms and put it in there when a new cycle would start, and it was like, well, you're under 21 days, so this might be pointing to PCOS, or definitely something's wrong, so you need to make an appointment with your doctor. It's like, well, I don't have a doctor, and I'm not going that route. I'm not gonna go to a doctor. And so I was very lost. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who to ask. Even reaching out to my midwife is like, there's no answers there. The only thing that she was able to assure me of was that it's probably not perimenopause. And because my specific question to her was, have you ever seen someone go through perimenopause this soon after having a baby? And she's like, no, I have never heard of that. And so I was like, okay, well, all of the symptoms are pointing to that. Over the age of 35, bleeding irregularly. I'm having crazy mood swings. I am exhausted, overwhelmed, can't get through the day. Lots of mom guilt because I can't show up for my kids. My kids are overwhelming. I can't be a good mom to them because I'm so short-tempered and snippety with them and yelling at them and all the things that I don't want to do because I didn't have the physical resources to do it, and my central nervous system was completely hijacked. I call it a nervous system like collapse is what I call it, because that's what it felt like. It felt like I was just collapsing. I was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I was very broken. I started to hate my body. I started to shame my body. I hated myself. I started to, in the last episode, you heard me really share my raw emotions about what it feels like to feel like you've been abandoned by God and how to regain that trust with Him. And so if you've ever found yourself in that place, not necessarily because your physical health, maybe because you went through a terrible, terrible tragedy and you don't know how to trust the Lord again, you can go back and listen to that episode as well. And that was a direct link to me not having a spiritual relationship with the Lord anymore, and really having a hard time trusting Him and having a hard time talking to Him and having a hard time reading my Bible, because Lord, you allowed this to happen to me, and this is like not okay. Like really what I was going through was not okay. And so I just lost trust with Him. And that's the best way that I know to say it. And it's been little small steps of getting myself back into a place of trusting Him again, and small steps of opening my heart up in a very limited, vulnerable place to allow Him in. And that's just how it goes sometimes. If you were abandoned by someone and lost trust with someone here on earth, it probably wouldn't be a night and day difference where all of a sudden you're just okay with allowing that person back into your life and being vulnerable with them again. And so that's part of my story of how I came to realize that this is not perimenopause, and what I believe we're telling, and this is from my own personal experience, and then I've watched other women say they're going through perimenopause and they're literally describing the same exact things that I went through. And I can recognize, like, this is not perimenopause. This perimenopause is just a label that we've given women to help them feel like this is normal, what they're going through. That the crazy emotions, the hijacked emotions, the hijacked periods, the hijacked hormones, the hijacked metabolic system, not even able to digest food anymore. That's normal. That's normal. You're just going through perimenopause. It'll get better eventually. Let's just mask these symptoms with a pill or a surgery and all will be well. When the reality is that you don't have the resources, you're completely depleted of minerals, your hormones are completely hijacked, not to mention you probably have lots and lots of unhealthy amounts of certain minerals stuck in the tissues that need to get out. So calcium can get stuck in the tissues. Iron can get stuck in the tissues. Copper can get stuck in the tissues. Heavy metals get stuck in the tissues. And they love the thyroid, and to slow the thyroid down, they love the brain. They love organs. This is where they settle. They also settle into the fat of our body. So whenever you are overweight or you find yourself gaining weight, these toxins love to settle into the fat tissues of the body. It's a way of protecting us. A lot of times the reason that we gain weight is because the body is trying to protect us from something, and then you begin to lose weight. Where are those metals going to go if you're not opening up your detox pathways? So that's just a little side note, and maybe like a whole nother episode that we should do soon. And so staying on track with perimenopause though, I want to get into the 3 main points that we're going to talk about today. The triggers that are actually burnout triggers and not perimenopause triggers, okay? So let's dive into the 3 triggers that I believe are actually burnout symptoms and not perimenopause symptoms, okay? The first one is your hormones are not going crazy, okay? Your hormones are not going crazy. It is actually your body in survival mode. It is actually a trauma response to all the stress you've ever walked through, to all of the hyperfixating on things, to all of the negative self-talk, to all of the childhood trauma that you may have gone through. Listen, childhood trauma does not necessarily look like a major thing happened in your life. Childhood trauma, maybe we shouldn't use the word trauma, but it looks like mindsets that you were taught as a child that actually weren't in alignment with God. And you have taken those mindsets on through adulthood. Okay. So for example, here's a good one. A lot of us grew up playing sports. And so we learned that we have to perform and that we have to hustle all the time. We have to run through life and we have to jump from one thing to the next. This isn't trauma. It's a stress response in the body and shows that we're addicted to cortisol. And so our cortisol levels are always on high alert, and so therefore we're burning through all kinds of minerals and our adrenals are getting completely depleted and therefore not able to keep up with the extreme demand that we're putting on ourselves to be this high achieving person every single day. We're not giving ourselves margin between tasks every day. We're moving from one thing to the next, without being able to take a 5-minute pause from one event to the next. So when I get done recording this podcast, it's extremely important for me to be able to give myself some margin before I move on to the next task, whether that looks like going to eat something after this, whether it looks like getting in my car and going to the next place, even if it looks like staying at my home and just tidying up around the house. I'm not just going to move from one thing to the next and just keep checking things off my to-do list. I'm actually going to give myself margin during the day to move from that thing to the next so that I have time to calm down, recognize that time is on my side. I'm not always in a fight against time, and that these things will get done. They will get done. They're here, and if they don't get done today, they'll be here tomorrow, okay? And so that is an example of what maybe childhood trauma can look like whenever I'm referring to childhood trauma. It's a stress response. And then there are other serious traumas that we go through in our life that actually do affect our physical health. I remember going through a time in my life where it wasn't one specific trauma, it was a situation going on, and I was stuck in fight or flight literally for years. And I remember there were certain situations, words, people, things that would trigger me to the point that actually I've had 2 of these in my life. One was the abortion that I've spoken and told about many times, and you can go back and listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and hear like my full story. I think it's like in 4 separate parts, my story part 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can go hear like all of my story in there. And so after I had that abortion, like I spent years in fight or flight mode of, if the word abortion was mentioned, like I would have a full on body reaction to needing to escape. Like I have to get out of here. I feel like everyone sees me. I feel very exposed. I can't stand the word. Had to crawl out of it, wanted to climb under my chair, whatever. But like a full on body response. I would feel my body go into a trauma response of like hypervigilance, okay? And then went through another time like that too. And being around certain people would trigger me. Getting certain text messages come through, that was a big one, would trigger me. And feeling that like my wishes and my needs were not honored by certain family members too, just prolonged the healing process a lot longer. It took me a long time to even voice my needs. And then when I felt like I wasn't honored, it just was like another layer on the trauma, okay? And so that's makes total sense why my body went into burnout mode or perimenopause at 35. I was 35. And so it makes total sense now looking back, like, yes, you were extremely stressed for many years of your life. And so your body spent time in that fight or flight mode, burning through minerals because your stress levels were up. Everything that you experienced was high alert mode, not to mention you had 3 tiny children at home and you were trying to keep your head above float just doing that. And then having a hard time like connecting with my husband during those years and him being checked out during those years. And so it was all like piled on, right? And then I also spent time stuffing those emotions with my husband and really honestly didn't think anything was wrong until burnout hit. And I was like, I actually said to some of my friends, like, I think I'm just really mad at my husband. I think I'm just really mad at him. But it was like overwhelming. Like I was sobbing and crying and angry and like extremely emotional. And thank God he gave me friends that can handle my emotions. Like if you have those extreme emotions, you've got to find a friend that can handle those extreme emotions, because there's lots of people out there that can't do it. They can't handle those emotions. They're going to run, and you're going to feel even more abandoned, okay? So don't blame it on them. Just find someone who can handle those emotions, okay? Because emotions are hard to handle. And if you can't find someone, I'm here for you. We cry in our Zoom calls. We laugh on our Zoom calls. We share the deepest, darkest parts of our secrets and our hearts with each other. And that's just the way it goes. If you really want to heal, you're going to really have to dive deep into these things that your body has stuffed down for way too long. And it's really the body's way of like, that sediment is beginning to settle, and it's been shaken for so long that the traumas and the responses are just rising to the top, okay? And so that's what's going on. And if you feel like you're going to explode, it's time to sit with those feelings and those emotions and work through them. Even if you feel like that's not exactly what's going on, you don't have, because I do work with a lot of clients who show extreme stressors, but they don't have the negative self-talk. They don't have the negativity in their life. They don't have the PMS symptoms or the crazy extreme rage and emotional roller coaster. Like, good for you. I did, and I know what it feels like, and it's really terrible. But the truth is that the test doesn't lie, and there are still very extreme things that you're going to have to work through and begin to admit to yourself, even if they aren't punching you in the face, so to speak, okay? It's important that, like, what are your thoughts when you're alone? What kind of thoughts come up when you're in that quiet space and you allow yourself to just sit? Okay, those are the things that come up that you need to work through. All right, moving on to the next point. Burnout exposes what you've been stuffing down for years. Point in case that I was trying to make. That's exactly what happens when those things begin to rise to the top. You have been stuffing things down for years, and now these things are catching up with you. That's basically what a midlife crisis is too. These people, like, it's midlife, all of a sudden they're doing crazy things, making crazy decisions. They've been married for 20 years and all of a sudden they're going through divorce, or all of a sudden they're, all of a sudden not happy with themselves and doing extreme and wild things. And it's because they've stuffed their own needs, their own personal autonomy for too long. They've given out to others except for themselves, and this happens to men too, and they've not allowed themselves or voiced their needs, their opinions, their strong points to their spouse, and worked through all of those things. And so it begins to rise to the top. And if you refuse to work through it, there's going to be consequences. Midlife is when the body stops tolerating self-abandonment. Midlife is when the body stops tolerating self-abandonment. So again, going back to constantly putting everyone first, constantly thinking that your needs aren't really important. I mean, a really simple one for moms is like showering and bathing, right? Like, everyone else gets a shower before you, everyone else gets a bath before you. Like, in our house, I usually have to make an announcement. Like, I'm going to take a shower. Is everyone okay? I have to make, I feel like I have to do that in order to make sure my husband's good. You know that I'm going to be gone. But on the other hand, he's never done that. It's just accepted. Like, he's going to go take a shower and he doesn't have to tell me. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. Like, that's how we've done it all these years. But looking back and comparing the two to one another, that's the way that usually women are operating, and especially the work at home moms or stay at home moms, because you're the one with the kids all day and you've got to make sure everything's in order. Everything has its place. Everything is systemized. Everyone is taken care of. That's your job every single day. And when you're not doing that, the home becomes utter chaos. Our kids become utter chaos. They do and say and watch and eat whatever they want. And so we're there to regulate that every single day. And it just kind of becomes our norm, instead of stepping back and taking a pause and saying, what do I actually want? What do I actually need? And going with that and making sure that we prioritize those things. Because if you don't, again, it's going to catch up with you. It is the body's way of telling you that you have abandoned yourself for far too long. And now, and I'm not going to allow you to do it any longer. you need to identify where you've normalized exhaustion, name the patterns. So for example, people pleasing, I did a whole episode on fawning, if you want to go back and watch that a couple weeks ago. Over giving, spiritual bypassing. That's kind of that mother's intuition that we've talked about. I also talked about that in the last episode recently. I need to get all of my episode numbers down so I can tell y'all exactly where to go. Pushing through, pushing way too hard. Again, kind of this mentality that we are taught, especially if you played sports or especially if you come from a high achieving family. You've been taught that, like, you know, you've got to achieve something in order to get a reward. You've got to be good enough in order to get praise. And you've got to, you know, it's the opposite of unconditional love, right? And that healing requires regulation, not more discipline. So in order to work through these problems, it's not about becoming more disciplined, it's about regulating. So giving yourself space between one task to the next. If you're not getting enough sunlight, if you're not eating well and eating good, whole, nutritious foods that actually support your gut and don't cause inflammation in the gut, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not getting enough sunlight, if you're not taking time for yourself, if you're not doing deep breath work, these are all things that contribute to chronic stress and your health being depleted, because these are things that God designed us to do every single day. He didn't design us to live in overwhelm and to overexert ourselves every single day. He designed us to live and operate from a place of peace and joy every single day. Like, think about the joy that you feel when you wake up as a child on Christmas morning. He designed us to live that way every single day. Come, Jesus, come. Amen. Doesn't that feel amazing to know that we're going to feel like it's Christmas morning every single day once God has restored the new earth? So the last point that I want to make is that your cycle is a stress report, not a countdown clock. All of us have to track our cycle. We know when it's coming. We know when we're nowhere near it. And so it's easy to get into this mindset of it's just a countdown clock. Like, we're just counting down the days for our cycle to get here and we're just trying to get through it. We're just doing our best to get through it. But the truth is that your cycle is feedback for your stress response. And so if your cycle begins to change, if your cycle begins to get worse, if you have more period cramps, if you have more digestive issues, if you have a lot of clotting, these kinds of things are all like they're a report as to what's actually going on with your health. And so if you begin to pay attention to those things and recognize that things are getting worse, you're not able to get through your cycle near as smoothly as you used to, you have a lot more PMS, you have a lot more cramps, you have a lot more heavier bleeding, whatever your case may be. If you have spotting beforehand, or if it goes longer than 7 days. All of these things, if it's irregular, if it's starting to happen every 2 to 3 weeks instead of, more like 28 days, because if your cycle can stretch out to that 28 days, it's a sign that you have good ovulation and you have a strong ovulation point, so that egg, when it begins to dissolve, that's what produces progesterone, and we should see progesterone rise during the second half of your cycle, and that should get you through without getting the PMS symptoms into your cycle. And that's why we also have such low energy, because all of our hormones crash right before we start our cycle. And that's what triggers the body to begin to slough the lining of our uterus. And so if you don't have good ovulation and your body's not able to produce that progesterone the way that it needs to, then you will have shorter cycles. And so it's really important to support your body in a way that it can produce enough progesterone the second half of your cycle. So a lot of women will actually supplement with progesterone, but it begs the question, but why is the body not able to produce enough progesterone? What's it lacking? What are the raw materials that it's lacking in order to produce that progesterone? And there's quite a few things that can go into it, but zinc is very much related to progesterone in the body. And many, many times I see zinc elevated on the HTMA test, which means the body is not utilizing zinc very well. It's actually a loss. The body is just dumping it, and so it comes out in the hair. And it shows that it doesn't, just because you have high zinc levels doesn't mean that you have plenty of zinc in the body. It means that the body is dumping it and not utilizing it. It's not breaking it down, and it's not turning it into the progesterone that the body should be turning it into. And so these are just some quick examples of things that you can look for in your cycle, but also when your cycle is not normal and it begins to change and you start experiencing all of these symptoms leading up to your cycle, this is also a huge sign that you've got blood sugar instability going on. You might have spikes, you might have crashes, even if you don't feel it, because I didn't necessarily feel like I had blood sugar spikes and crashes, but I definitely did. It showed up on my test, and as I started to learn my body a lot better, it was like, oh yeah, I feel my body getting shaky. Oh, that hunger hits me like, gotta have it now kind of feeling. Like if I don't eat now, I feel like I'm fixing to get nauseous and throw up. Blood sugar issues. Blood sugar issues can also point to if you're having morning sickness. That can be a blood sugar issue. It can be a gallbladder issue. It can have morning sickness is also a sign that you've got backed up bowel flow. You're not really, your bowel flow isn't moving fluidly. So which also means you might have estrogen dominance. And so these are all things that go on within the female body. And estrogen dominance is also related to blood sugar instability, okay? Inflammation can also block hormone signaling, which we definitely can see on the HTMA test. It points to many markers for inflammation in the body. It's quite incredible. And because a lot of people kind of, they like, I don't have like swelling in my body, but definitely there were inflammation markers on my test that showed you're definitely fighting inflammation. I had a client just recently, inflammation was like her number one thing on the test, but you would not know it. She's lost a lot of weight. She's not puffy. She doesn't experience all this swelling and stuff, but inflammation was definitely like, we've got to get the inflammation under control. You've got to start learning what foods are causing inflammation and not causing inflammation. And so that's hard if you're not physically, if you're just looking for actual swelling in the body and that's not what you're seeing. We've got to look for other markers, what's going on. And so your cycle is one of these markers and symptoms that we can look for in the body. So those are my 3 points that I want to make. So we're going to wrap it up and I'm going to go over these again and give them to you straightforward so that you can take them with you when you go. Just remember that if you're 35 years old or even 40 years old, and someone's trying to diagnose you with perimenopause or tell you that you're going through perimenopause to try and tell you that these are normal symptoms and something that every woman is going to go through, that is a lie. You've got to know that that's not normal for your body and that instead your body needs the support that it needs. And the things that it needs is nourishment, it needs rest, it needs you to take things off of your plate, it needs you to work through those mindsets, those behavior patterns, the stress patterns that you have lived in for far too long, and start working through those things and start creating a lifestyle around yourself that supports health and wellness instead of burnout and exhaustion, okay? So first, burnout puts your body in survival mode, okay? Number 2, burnout forces buried emotions and trauma to the surface. Yes, it does. Your body no longer has the resources to keep stuffing it down, so you're gonna have to deal with it. And then third, burnout drains the resources your hormones need to function. And this is where you see irregular cycles begin. So, I'm glad you joined me today. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year. And again, if you want to know more about my Rooted and Restored Wellness program, just go to the show notes. The link is there. And I will see you guys on the next podcast episode. Bye.